Hello and welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. My name is Bruce Gemmel. I am a researcher, draftsman, and model maker. My uh, discipline is architecture. So, what I'm doing, this is episode 43, the architecturally provocative artifact. And it's recognition, evaluation, and nurturing of the entity. So, these are a series of ruminations I do once a week in the middle of the night here in New York City in Queens. And what I do is kind of just go over ideas that I've been working on to kind of get a sense of kind of getting them out. Um, there's been two changes I'm going to make here on episode 43. First one is the fact that I used to do a recap of all the previous episodes. We're at a point now where I kind of think that if anyone is interested, you know, if you want to, you can go back and look. They're all kind of on the page, and there's like 42 previous ones, and this is 43. But it's basically just a kind of starting, going through, getting to where we are now. Second thing is, I think that one of the things that I've always found is that as I go through these things, I find that certain things, especially given some of the term affection that plays a prominent role in the work tonight, I think it's important to kind of give some sense of some of those things that were for me, um, very important in terms of my kind of like formation. So today, I've been rereading Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self Reliance, and there's a part here uh, that I find very enjoyable. And he says at the very beginning of the essay, this is like one or two pages in, it's a very short essay. It's only like 19, 20 pages long. But he says, your goodness must have some edge to it, else it is none. The doctrine of hatred must be preached as the counteraction of the doctrine of love when that pulls and whines. I shun father and mother and wife and brother when my genius calls me. I would write on the lintels of the doorpost whim. I hope it is somewhat better than whim at last. But we cannot spend the day in explanation. Expect me not to show cause why I seek or why I exclude company. Then again, do not tell me, as a good man did today, of my obligation to put all poor men in good situations. I love this piece because it talks about the fact that, and the people who know me, some of them who watch this program, understand my moodiness, my broodingness, and my kind of, as Julie says, Bruce is like where is that the temperature, the weather like?
What?
Where's the weather that's like me in terms of my moods?
Oh, Montana.
Montana.
It changes every 5 minutes.
Right. So my moods change rapidly. I think I've been probably going through menopause my whole life, but my moods are very erratic. And as a result, sometimes it's like, but I kind of feel as if, they kind of, it's important to understand that idea that when one feels the urge or the impulse for one's work, one needs to attend to that. I mean, it's part of a bigger essay, and it's kind of part of the bigger idea of self-reliance that Emerson talks about. But I feel as if that's an important part, that idea of you don't need to explain nor ask for the need or the desire to excuse yourself. You simply do it. Anyway, so with that said, I think I'm going to start each piece, each one of these, because Julie also said, going through the recap, it kind of eats up a lot of time, and we find at the end when we're trying to talk about things of consequence, we run out of time. And again, I have this artificial limit of, originally it was half an hour, now it's basically an hour. But I kind of, that 15 minutes, again, if one's interested, one can go back and watch, they're all kind of listed, the other 42 on the channel. And I mean, I encourage you to do so if you're interested. But again, like I said, the nature here is for me to kind of like put these ideas together. Anyway, with that said, tonight we're going to be talking about what I call the architecturally provocative artifact. It's something I came up with as part of design, organic design thinking, which is a system that I employ in terms of my belief in the idea of the fact that architecture is much more of a kind of a process related verb than it is an actual thing, where I would say something is a noun, where I say like, oh, that building is architecture. Whereas I think that artifacts, entities, are different kind of consequences of the same thing. An artifact is something that affords the possibility. But a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the idea of the provocation of novel utility. That's the desire. I think that given what I see is the stagnation of the impulse of architecture, I believe that that desire for a provocation of novel utility is something that we should manifest. And I believe you can't manifest it consciously. I think it's something that has to come out of a desire. That's why I think the term affection is something that we'll talk about quite a lot. But before we do that, the absolute best and most interesting part of these little kind of like ruminations is what's going on in this week in Julie. So, Puddle.
I just need a couple.
Couple what?
Couple minutes.
Okay. Is it okay? So before we find out in what's new in Julie, let's talk about what we will be doing here. So, the idea of the artifact is how to find it, how to evaluate it, and nurture it. We talked a couple of weeks back about the idea of my interest in the fact that as a young person, as a child, I didn't know what architecture was. I didn't know what things were for. I found some disappointment. I found some surprise. And I found a lot of potential and excitement. I remember one of my first experiences architecturally was I really enjoyed being put in my crib, because I found my crib was the kind of thing that if I was to slip into a kind of semi-conscious state of sleep, I was protected because I was in an elevated position, knowing full well that if I fell out, I would get hurt, that I was protected from that fall. I always loved sleeping on the floor. I always found the floor safe because I didn't really see this kind of catastrophic idea of falling. Anyway, I'm sure there's a therapist out there who can tell you what that really means. I'm sure it's for a fear of intimacy, because I had an ex-girlfriend who was a therapist, and she said, when in doubt, it's fear of intimacy. So given that, we have this idea that I remember when I transitioned from the crib to the bed, everyone was so excited. You've done such a great job of not suffocating yourself as a child, and we're great parents. Now we can kind of put you in a bed. And I kind of like, they took me and they placed me on this thing, which was like this little mound at the top. And they placed me in the middle of this little mound. And all I could see was like, I felt like I was on the top of the Matterhorn. And I was like looking at all these expanses of things running out from me, which all seemed like they were all downhill and then a steep drop off. And I said, I'm not going to enjoy this. And to me, that was a very disappointing situation. So as an adult, I love the idea of kind of like finding a kind of a crevice or some kind of thing to kind of anchor myself to, so I can kind of like, overcome that fear of kind of like ending up, kind of banging my head off the floor. Anyway, so as a result of that, these are the kind of things that I kind of found myself kind of thinking about in terms of that idea of a provocation of novel utility. I mean, we have certain prescriptions that we have as people. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to go to the bathroom, we need to kind of like reproduce. And we have these environments that we create for ourselves in order to kind of make these things possible, socially and privately. And I kind of feel as if, we've kind of gotten to the point where we have come across these incredibly, I would say, insipid formalities that kind of existed for the last, in some cases, connections to say thousands of years, at the very least, um, hundreds of years. Uh, oh, hi, it's Peter from the Met. Hey, man, how's it going? Good to hear from you. Nice to see you. Always fun. Enjoyed talking to you. So, if you have any stories you want to add or any comments, feel free. I always like to. This is the first attempt to kind of get people involved. I mean, it seems as if Julie's done a very good. Nice to see you as well. Very much. Okay, so Julie's done a good job at kind of getting people from the Met, some of our friends there, to kind of comment and watch our program. Anyway, so architecturally provocative artifacts was my idea of kind of getting into this idea that I had seen in kind of Bruce Goff and some of his students, in the fact that rather than having this thing that this is a chair and this is what it's for, so that, or we go out to make a chair based on these, kind of pragmatic concepts, we basically try to find these things that give us different consequences. One of the things I liked was, I remember in the 70s, there was these kind of things where they, remember what they had, Julie? They had those conversation pits, and suddenly everyone was off their very kind of restrictive chairs and tables, and everyone was sitting around on the floor, and it was more lounge-like and less yes, exactly. And I think that's what I think we'll talk about later, about the idea of a shape and a form, is the fact that I felt that there's a certain prescriptive, like in the Platonic case, of things associated with any individual artifact. And the idea is to kind of like provoke that idea of the artifact out of what are somewhat static, kind of like restrictive formalities. I feel as if I've always felt that the chair was like some kind of torture device. It kind of is an incredibly, I mean, it's like chairs are restrictive. They're basically forcing you in a certain direction. It's very hard to move. It's very hard to kind of have your attention elsewhere. You're usually focused on something that is primary and puts you in a secondary place. You're subservient. And I find that is always something that I've never really enjoyed. I always like the idea of kind of being on the floor or being on the ground, and kind of being able to be much more free to move, not just bipedally, but also kind of like, kind of having wrestled and played judo. I enjoy the idea of kind of like being on the floor and being able to kind of move more on, with all my four limbs. So anyway, that's absolutely right, Peter. It's, it is in relation to that idea. I mean, I don't consider myself a Platonist, but I do understand the concept of the forms. And I think that prescriptive nature is very much an idea of what kind of I identify in terms of the things that we accrue as we discover and nurture the artifact. So let's talk about the basic nature of what that is. So let me go back to what I read a couple of weeks ago about the operation and the process of organic design thinking. So this is very quick. The substrate for operation is to scale any artifact from a perspective that will allow what will be revealed be its most provocative. For this to happen, you need to identify scales and perspectives for their potential to generate form. In order to do this, you need to train yourself to be able to read artifacts as regards scale and perspective. Now, scale and perspective, let's see. Chair also could represent power, like the first seat of the Senate. Yes, exactly. A cathedral, yes, exactly. And I think these formalities kind of like become very socially and kind of personally restrictive, physically restrictive. But also the thing is, they're also kind of like become desirous in terms of kind of like hierarchies of power, hierarchies of structure, in the fact that one wants to be sitting at the chair at the head of the table. One wants to be in a place where one is recognized as having a certain authority over others. But again, this now becomes a battleground, right? So I've always felt that the more this is not a contemplative circumstance. This is more a kind of power circumstance. And being a speculative individual who wants to exist in the realm of ideas, I find that not the place I seek out. I enjoy speaking freely in the public square. I enjoy working on things that are interesting to me. And I think that I'm not shunning that. I recognize the cultural reality of that, but I've always found it to be something that kind of is very, to me, very restricting. But again, we're using this as an example. Going back to this, to commence operation within this process, you will need to coalesce an artifact, which is an unrecognizable fragment or unknown entity as pertains to the information that it will present, and is, in addition, something the individual finds an affection for or an interest in. This condition illustrates the important condition which we refer to as perspectival novelty, or as I said before, the provocative, as I said before, the provocation of novel utility, right? These are the things that we'll start to explore. So what I've done is I actually found an example that I could use to illustrate an exercise, and we'll go through that. So a couple of weeks ago, Julie had found this, and I kind of thought to myself, this has a tremendously kind of provocative character to itself. Now, what I'll do is I will start to manipulate this and look at its potential and see if some of my interest, first I'll analyze the interest, trying to think about the things that I think I see, and then we'll see what we can develop. Now, the idea, again, the reason why we use scales and perspective is this is a model. Now, one of the things I've also felt is that one of the things that kind of holds back architects is they work consciously based on kind of like tried, tested formalities. I think one of the things that I've started to see in Bruce Goff and in the organic impulse of American architecture was the idea of not known formalities, what I would call provocative formalities, things that basically kind of loosened us from these formalities and allowed us the potential to find others. So as a result, I kind of found that that was not something that was conscious. It kind of something that kind of you, like I was when I was a child, would find ways when I would kind of like go to the bank where my mother used to take me and kind of like find these kind of neoclassical kind of details and kind of try to kind of use it as if I was kind of like a mountain climber or something like that. I would kind of try to find a relationship between my physical form as a small boy and these artifacts and these circumstances. So it was actually kind of using my body to test what these things were. So in case that like this right now is just a piece of leaf that's been folded and somewhat decayed. So, it's like, well, what I do is I just start to investigate it. So first thing is like, yeah, it's about the same scale as my wrist. I can kind of attach it, right? I mean, just kind of like this, just kind of playing, thinking about the fact that you can start to see these indications of what, this would be at my own scale. I find that at least now I found a connection, physical connection. I could probably find other places where it could exist. But then the idea is like, that's the idea. What I found interesting is what I'll probably do as my first analysis is kind of write something down and kind of see what those potentials are, and then start to think of perspectives. Perspectives basically being a point of view from which I view the object, or kind of like start to kind of make indications of what those things would be. It's like, let's see. Okay. So like a mask. Get about the scale where it kind of expands to kind of cover that ocular aspect. Kind of single over here. Okay. All right. So, that's the idea. Is you can, but what makes something have an affection as an artifact? What I think gives it an affection is the fact that you're kind of drawn to in some way that something excites you about it. And I think, do I feel out of excitement for this? Not necessarily, but I do feel as a kind of illustrator of the principles. And I think it's going to be a fun exercise to kind of do for a couple of weeks and then kind of like report back as to what potentially, we have, discovered, if anything. But I kind of found that, like, yeah, it certainly, reminds me a little bit of the mystery of Picasso. He kind of took this thing and he was kind of using this kind of early telestrator to kind of illustrate what he had kind of discovered in terms of the way in which he kind of could see and analyze the stages of a development of a process. So the next thing is, like, you're going to look for analogies and metaphors in terms of those things that you kind of start to imagine in here. In a way, Julie and I were just talking about this on the way home from the Met after dinner, was that one of the things that we've always found somewhat frustrating, or maybe annoying, maybe not frustrating, more annoying, is the idea of what we call the Turner effect of the happy accident. The idea that, like, one looks at something and kind of sees the faces in the clouds. It's like, oh, look, it's Thomas Jefferson. Oh, look, it's, it's Bigfoot, or like whatever it is. And I remember my own interest with Alberto Giacometti. I found that at a certain point, I had a tremendous reverence for the intensity and kind of visceral nature of his work. But as a certain time went on, I missed the precision of character and kind of like precision of delineation that I kind of had always admired in Leonardo. And I felt as if, it was kind of devolving into that, oh, look, it's Annette. No, it's Caroline. And oh my God, I see them both. And, it was more kind of this fact that, like, it really wasn't the distinct, deep understanding and appreciation. It just became very visceral. So I kind of found that there was much more to be gleaned by kind of turning back towards Leonardo. But for me, in more case, I kind of felt as if that happy accident could be something of tremendous potential as an artifact, is the fact that one could find and engineer just exactly that thing that we were all kind of like somewhat intrigued by. So that affection that we kind of saw when we kind of thought what the face in the clouds was what if we did reverse engineer this and found out specifically what our impression truly was. So as if, like, we had the potential to see that nightmarish, ghoulish image in kind of in precise delineation. One of the things I think I've always enjoyed about Julie's work is the fact that she makes mechanical illustrations of nightmares, and it's kind of it's an amazing thing. And I think this is similar to that, in that that's really what we're doing, making the kind of like construction drawings, the working drawings. As an architect, I understand the difference between the freehand drawing and the construction drawing, the actual details of how the pieces fit together, how they're engineered, and how it kind of goes together and how it actually moves. So, Julie's paintings, Julie's drawings are not just that. They're actually kind of like the construction documents of a nightmare. If you were going to build a nightmare, these would be the plans and specifications one would use. It's a cool idea, but this is kind of the same way in terms of finding those provocative artifacts that we kind of wonder about and kind of dream about and believe we see, but don't necessarily get to the point where we can touch it, but we imagine it in terms of the fact that it's a dragon or whatever. What does the dragon's breath smell like? What does the dragon's teeth look like? What are the dragons? If we were to touch its surface, what would it feel like? Is it cold? Is it hot? Is it have some kind of texture to it? Working out all these details is kind of like the I believe the base operation of the architect, and by the architect is the one who kind of like gives kind of like who fleshes out these things, literally in the case of flesh, if it's necessary. So we'll see how that goes over the next couple of weeks. So what when I also talked about perspectives, perspectives being that place that you find gives you an insight into something that is more extraordinary. Today, I've had this object around for a long time. It was something I played with, and I took these make believe little pieces of paper that have a very distinct structure, if you can see here. And I actually managed to kind of build them so they could engage themselves without actually being glued, that they could physically engage themselves into the cavity of the fish. This was a medicinal fish I bought at an apothecary in China, but I love the idea of how this kind of parasitic form could have been imagined to have kind of gone inside the fish and then erupted and kind of blasted out into, in a way that it kind of did, similar to kind of say a pepsid wasp, where it basically lays its eggs, or it basically puts its eggs in the water, and then the eggs are ingested and they burst out the fish once the eggs basically become mature. It was kind of devilish and demonish, but I kind of really liked that. I think it reminded me a little bit of the Aliens movie as well, where they kind of impregnated humans, and Sigourney Weaver, both humans and Sigourney Weaver, were impregnated with these aliens that would kind of burst open and kind of like hatch. So this was kind of like in a way I built these little mechanisms that I could stick in, and they had these claws that would actually grab into the inside of the viscera of the cavity. So anyway, as a result of having this, I've had many different bases for it. In fact, one of the bases I had was just a kind of stand that kind of presented it like a tanto Japanese sword, which was my original desire. But then I kind of found that, this is the most provocative perspective. It kind of looking into the cavity, into the viscera, and seeing the disruptive aspect. So now Julie and I kind of talked about the fact that we're going to kind of make a series of stands. And one of them actually is like a marionette's puppet that actually would then be taken and kind of put and hung as you would hang a marionette, because this has become a kind of somewhat animated figure. But anyway, so it's interesting that like I've kind of had a kind of journey through different perspectival opportunities in terms of that. I mean, Julie believes this is the strongest position. Again, initially, just kind of showing it as a kind of symbolic representation of a kind of like of its relationship to the tanto short sword or kind of blade that you would see at the Met or other museums. And then to kind of get to the point where I then started to kind of tilt it, to kind of show this. But this perspective was kind of like, this perspective has become more the case. So now what I'm doing is thinking of the idea of kind of hanging it and seeing it as something that would be hung as if it was kind of being suspended. So, and that's kind of, so what happens is that's an idea of finding the point of view, finding points of view that gives you the opportunity to engage in a deeper level of understanding of the artifact. So what's new in Julie?
Oh, lots of things. I assume you opened that, I hope.
Yes. Yeah. No, actually, the guy who was in the street who I got it from, he had opened it, he said.
What's open?
It is open. I opened it. You gave it to me. Remember? Yeah, I said, can you bring it to me? Yeah. So.
I assume.
Anyway, what's new in Julie?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll bring it over. I'm almost finished with the drawing. It's right here.
I love this drawing. Peter's on from the Met.
Oh, that's great. Hi, Peter. Thanks for joining us.
He's like making all these
that's great.
comments.
You want to hold it up? Do you have tripod hands?
Yes, I do. Okay.
So, hi, Peter. I didn't have a chance to show it to you because you were still in the main hall, not downstairs. this is my drawing from today and last week. There's a lot of glare. I did a huge amount of work. There's a lot of pencil. You might want to go super close. I think it'll cut the glare.
Okay. Yeah, but then you can only see so much.
Well,
of it.
then move it up and down. Try vertically too.
I will. I'm just trying to.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I worked in the central
If anyone knows
area.
how to actually, I wonder if you could share your screen. I know that, like on your live screen, you can share
There's
your screen.
Definitely a way, if anybody knows,
Yes, tell us.
including you, Peter, how to post a still image on the side of your screen while you're talking about it, because we're not techie people, so we don't know how to do
two
that.
things I'd like to be able to do in the evolution of what we have here is that one would be to be able to kind of share the screen to just show the images if it's
As
a text or
we're
a
talking
drawing.
about it, right.
And the second would be to be able to bring other people on, right?
yes,
Who we could kind of like speak with,
in a window.
remotely. Exactly.
In a
so
window.
we could, because I think there's a lot of people, especially that we're kind of finding we'd love to kind of discuss with.
Anyway,
so what's new in Julie? Tell us.
The drawing I'm almost finished with. And if they still hadn't had burnt out lights in the Met 9 days later where I'm drawing, it was very dark up there.
I'm sorry, Pete.
Yeah. So this is called Stomata of a Stygian Thistle. That's the title of my drawing. And it is Orthogenesis of Guard Cells is the subtitle. And I was researching the
Peter said perfect title would be Order Out of Chaos.
Oh, Order Out of Chaos.
Chaos.
Oh, nice.
I like that.
Nice.
Well, it's true.
Like
I mean, in
too.
fact, that's kind of that is very true.
That is true. Well, interestingly, the debate on orthogenesis, which I don't think runs counter to natural selection, it was kind of poo-pooed at the time, but it was very Lamarckian, and it definitely had its proponents who were very learned individuals. It was not in any way
reminds of a quantum effect.
Interesting. It was not in any way, a spurious theory, and I still think there's a lot to the orthogenetic mode of thought. And the reason why orthogenesis is in the subtitle of my piece and why I think it really resonates is the idea of a rapid and directed progressive evolution. And that's what this is about. Absolutely. So the actual concept of my drawing here was inspired by a discovery, a research article in the journal Science from last month, which is on how plants adapt and morph to combat intense heat. And it's not, the touchy-feely, eco stuff that people think. It's actually is a chemical thing. It's a cellular thing. So in fact, plants rapidly form more stomata on the surfaces of their leaves. But in the process of this rapid adaptation, these are malformed asymmetrical stomata, which normally have to parenchyma or guard cells on either side of a fairly symmetrical ovoid shape. Now, from what I saw in my own research of scanning electron micrographs of rapidly formed stomatal leaf surfaces, is a huge diversity of stomatal apertures. And some are radically asymmetrical. Bruce, would you like to weigh in on that idea? Go on. Go on, big guy.
Actually, I think it's kind of related to kind of one of the things that happens here is that, like, one of the things I've enjoyed in terms of my investigations is that in terms of the idea of looking for novel utility, provocatively novel utility, is the fact that you kind of don't find your landscape comfortable,
Mhm.
and you don't find your environment
Agreeable.
agreeable,
No.
or kind of like identifiable. You kind of see
Mhm.
yourself as an alien in an alien landscape.
Well, that's how I feel these days.
Yeah, but in that regard, I think
Uh,
what happens is,
mm.
I think of my own my own studies of
Oh,
what happened.
oh no.
Oh no, sorry, Pete.
No.
Of symbiogenesis, and I think the idea that we have discovered, or Lynn Margulis has discovered
Mhm.
from her investigations, and kind
Or
of like
rediscovered.
yeah, because
It wasn't
the
original.
symbiogenesis was not her original
No.
idea. She kind of came to understand and appreciate it
Just to clarify.
within the context
Mhm.
of evolutionary biology, to see that the fact that we can identify in the kind of smaller scales, that rather than a tree, we actually have a network of organisms, and the fact that
Mhm.
organisms have the ability, not consciously but opportunistically, to kind of network themselves by adapting and kind of sharing what we call like lateral gene transfer or horizontal gene transfer.
Mhm.
We were looking at that piece. What was it? It was the photosynthesizing
Oh yes. A
flatworm, or what was it? What was it?
It was a sea slug called a lettuce
sea slug.
And they've just made a discovery that it's a kleptomaniac of sorts, and
They
it
even use that term.
steals the photosynthetic cells that are now
chloroplasts.
called kleptophores.
Right. So the chloroplasts were actually, and in fact,
Yeah.
the example they used was the kind of mitochondria, which basically had an independent life before it basically became an aspect of our cells.
That'll be the subject of my next drawing.
Yeah, you're so clever.
Thank you.
All right.
Should
So-
we chat back? I don't know how to do that.
Oh yeah.
You could say thank you.
No, okay. Oh yeah. There we go.
I mean,
Say
because
it.
you did.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want them to think we're not looking. I don't know how to do that.
I don't either.
I think you hit the little sensor.
There we go. Okay,
So the other interesting
but
thing.
let's
sorry.
finish. So
Mhm.
what happened is she discovered the fact that
Mhm.
in situations of harsh times, harsh circumstances, that sometimes you would end up parting in such sweet sorrow, but I must rise in the morrow. It was nice joining you. Okay,
Oh.
off to see you. Right, and again,
Let's
this
just
will
wish
be
him a good night.
yes.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank
we
you for
really
joining.
appreciate it. Nice
You
to have you here with us.
for
It's okay
joining.
if you don't stay the whole time.
Yes.
You can watch the rest of the
tomorrow.
broadcast on the
For joining.
morrow
On the morrow.
with your blueberry muffin
Yes.
and your goat cheese.
Yes, and goat cheese berries.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
what happened was during times of the of hardships, you find yourself ingesting things that are not necessarily of your constitution out of
Mhm.
desperation, and sometimes these things don't necessarily totally get absorbed, and as a result, they basically find themselves in these kind of different circumstances, and
Yes.
this creates,
Mhm.
rather than this idea of kind of like just kind of opportunistic mutation like we assume in terms of natural selection over time.
Mhm.
There's actually this forced opportunism in the harsh nature where something doesn't get totally absorbed and it manifests itself as part of your genetic structure.
Mhm.
So rather than just being ingested in terms of like nutrients, sometimes the genetic material actually finds its way into the genome of the organism.
It does. May I do
Yeah, go ahead.
quick attack on here? In the case of the termite, this is a primary example of coevolution of species where
The
due
ability to digest cellulose, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
You spoiled my surprise.
Sorry, P.
Okay.
Here, have some tea. That'll help.
Yeah,
That'll quench your kind of like sense.
my sadness.
Your sadness.
Okay,
yes.
so when termites they competed, and they're actually very fragile, frail insects.
Like me.
Like Bruce. They can't really survive in very hot environments,
Like me.
very cold environments. They have a fairly narrow survival range.
Like me.
Like Bruce. Anyway.
A great indoorsman.
Yes. Anyway, so the ability to eat and digest something that no other creature really wanted, which is basically wood, which is pretty indigestible, they still can't. Here's the surprise: their microbes do. And the microbes in the gut of the termites are the symbionts without which they would starve. There have been numerous experiments where they were wiped clean. They were the effect of a clean room mouse, which they use as a model all the time. And the termites whose gut microbes were killed off died really, really fast because they did not have the ability to process or metabolize or digest the very indigestible cellulose in wood. So the point is, when it was added back, they were able to subsist on a diet, of, maple flakes and oak toasties and, all those things.
Yep.
And the cedar crackers that
That's all.
basically no other creature could
Right.
or wanted.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that and in fact, it said this in the science article,
Mhm.
that the lettuce, sea slug, I'm really pretty tired, was often in very harsh environments. And they suspect that the reason why it stole the chloroplast from the algae, enabled them to eat. And it said they even would digest those kleptoplasts and eat their own kleptoplasts when they were starving. So it was a food source. It was basically a way to get food in very nutrient poor environments.
Mhm.
Okay, Beth?
Yep. So I think the piece
If
is
you'd like to.
no. I think like I said, the only thing I thought was missing was
Yeah.
the
I'll try to hold it.
actual piece where it showed the the uh, the structure of the surface around the stomata, where
Mhm.
those pieces actually change their surface and their dexterity, and manifest themselves differently as a result
There
of
we
the
go.
harsh circumstances, which was kind of what was here. But I
Yeah.
think since the drawing is very complete, I
Yeah.
don't know if there's room to kind of add that, except maybe in this middle section. But I'm not sure how much you want to do.
I don't know. I really like the composition.
Yeah, it could. I think it could certainly be finished. I think it certainly
Right.
kind of illustrates, the point and creates a very evocative image. I find it kind of like the kind of somber, delicate kind of, kind of almost kind of hidden aspect at the top. This kind of piece that's folding away from us is very, very intriguing. It has a certain kind of haunted quality. It has
Thank you.
this kind of solemn but threatening, reality, which I find very, very, very kind of.
Talk about that part, because you also
Well, that's
really like
yeah.
that
I mean,
part.
well, actually, the piece. What I was speaking of is
Yeah.
here up at the top in this case over here.
Mhm.
These pieces here have a certain kind of mystery as they kind of are kind of dissolving into the mist, and they're kind of still present, but they have a kind of quiet but certain disarming and kind of unnerving quality. And then of course here at the top, this is a piece where Julie has taken some of the surface texture and kind of made it into this kind of emerging phoenix. It's kind of this creature. And I kind of think we had discussions about if
It
one
is
was to.
actually one of the points of the
It
other
is one of the
half
points of the other piece,
of
but
the
it's actually kind of
vase.
emerged. It's
Yeah.
emerged as its own entity.
Yes, it has.
Rising as if it
Broken
was.
away.
Now, here's my question:
Mm.
do we see this as the natural process of the reproductive nature of this piece, or is this a parasite? What?
It's orthogenesis.
Explain how.
Okay. This is all about plants in imperiled circumstances. Orthogenesis is rapid evolution in response to immediate need. So it is like a super fueled, hypersonic, rapid fire, directed, intentional evolution. And the reason why certain people didn't go for it is they didn't credit plants with having innate intelligence, which we now know they do.
Right. In times of hardship,
Yes.
usually organisms limit rather than expand their range of actions.
Not plants.
No, plants do too. I mean,
Not necessarily,
most when in restrictive environments, efficiency is kind of made very much a priority. So I mean, you don't waste water when you're water starved.
I quite agree.
I mean, so the thing is, in this case, the fact that it would eventually develop a new circumstance, a new capacity as a result, it would have to be as a result of kind of like that kind of drama of the thing that was consumed that basically created that anomaly. So I mean, is this that?
Yes, that's an excellent point.
Because I could see that creating that with that intention.
That's an excellent point. Let me just make one subtle differentiation here.
No, I forbid it.
Be ridiculous.
Because I'm always ridiculous.
Acute circumstances.
When do you know me not to be ridiculous?
Okay, let me try to get my focus.
You get your focus.
And
then I want to get back to this because remember we were talking about the architecture provocative artifact. That's why we kind of took 15 minutes off the show.
Yes.
So we could actually have more time, but
I'll make this really fast if you let me.
Okay.
So the point is acute versus chronic, and that's what's happening here. I believe that orthogenetic imperatives happen when acute becomes chronic crisis. There is the acute crisis where, as Bruce said correctly, organisms, plants, mammals, insects pull back. That's funny.
No, it's true. Think about it. Cholera pie was making do with what you had.
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
The same thing.
That actually is the title of one of my science fables.
Right, but it's the idea of kind of like
exactly it.
Basically kind of using what you have or what remains to its peak efficiency.
Yeah. Anyway, let me just complete this idea quickly so we can move on. So when the acute becomes chronic, I mean, when you have something like a plague, it doesn't necessarily go on. Some went on for a long time. Some ended relatively rapidly. When you have a sustained heating environment, which is what the plants are responding to with their orthogenetic adaptations, these things end up with multiplied and altered organelles. That's what plants do. That's what the article is about. So they actually change the shape of their cell wall. They add more lipids to their endoplasmic reticulum. They grow more stomata. So it's actually abundance and alteration in fundamental structures of their cells. So anyway, let's move on to your
right. But I mean, how in terms of the fact that it's basically in a state of crisis, abundance how?
I just said.
No, but I'm saying like you don't really have excess in a point of starvation.
But the plants do. I'm saying.
Not sure how.
The acute crisis has become chronic, meaning it's not a short time of warming.
No, it's a common thing.
Long
it's now their natural state. Yes.
So that's how they have adapted this rapid evolution towards many, many more stomata than they would normally have. Abundancy of stomata, which are the apertures that allow plants to exchange.
Right, so they would change their profile, but they don't create an excess. I mean, what they do is they kind of like try to compensate for their circumstance.
Anyway,
so the reality is what they do is they kind of like in this chronic state, in this in this no longer temporary state, they have to find the balance in order to kind of use the resources effectively, as effectively as possible. Okay, so
okay. Oh man.
So now let's
on to your topic.
Okay, so in the case, it's a good place to kind of turn over to this because we were talking before, and Peter rightfully talked about the idea of the fact that in Plato, the form is actually a prescriptive nature of an object, and there's a series of things in which, like, one would have, like, say, a series of identifiable characteristics. In a process-based metaphysics, like uh, Heraclitus or Whitehead, it's not as stable because you're dealing with a process that is a kind of temporarily stable entity that is under change. So in terms of the kind of famous thing is the difference between like homeostasis or homeoresis, and homeoresis basically being that sense of kind of like being able to kind of like find its kind of effectiveness. So in that case, what we're doing here is we're trying to find that prescriptive nature within the potential of the artifact. So the artifact as a model basically now will kind of like be able to kind of lend itself to certain iterations. Usually, um, there's three things. There's a physical object, there's drawings, and there's models. And I think these things can, instead of kind of doing them all at the same time to represent an artificial conscious idea, what you're doing is investigating the object by using these as forensic tools. What you're doing is you're trying to kind of tease out, what I use the term nurture, the development of that affection, that potential that you see in the artifact. So in that case, what happens is you're trying to find those things that give you that access to the novel utility that you sense is there in the object. Now, which?
Put that on here. No, that piece.
No, but I wanted to just keep it here so
Oh.
I could show it.
Oh, okay.
So now,
Pretty great.
this piece
It's really fascinating.
seems to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think
It's
what's interesting is
fascinating.
like what it actually was some kind of strand, but it's now kind of folded. But
It was a plant.
yeah, which plant was it? Do you remember?
I think we got it at the botanical gardens. Actually, it
Oh,
was
yeah?
something that we found on the ground.
Oh, okay.
It was a contorted leaf.
Uh-huh. But I kind of see the fact that it kind of gives itself
Fascinating.
that it seems to have, leaves often, like a lot of other objects, have a directional structure,
Mhm,
and it doesn't really kind of usually move in terms of symmetry from
mhm.
one central piece equally in two
No,
directions.
don't.
So this seems to have, at least in the impression, that potential. I don't know if that necessarily is the case, but I think as if like that possibility within the image intrigues me as a way in which to start.
It's contorted in the ecstasy of its drying process.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Its drying process brought it about to be this kind of like symbolic representation of
Mhm.
something, which now, as an architecturally provocative artifact,
Sure
is
is.
something we investigate. So we'll basically start to kind of like, well, first thing is kind of write about it, and then kind of so we have something that kind of expresses what is seen as the root of that affection, and then from there either maybe take it and draw it, or kind of draw it diagrammatically, draw it in a kind of like still life landscape way, or maybe make models of certain things and start to make sketches. But the idea is now to just kind of see this thing as what you want to make, want to discover it as an entity. Often, most times, I mean, architects are taught to, take a program from a client and then basically lay that out and then manifest that. It's a conscious process to kind of exhibit, a kind of wish list of a client for a certain, you create an organizational structure
Mhm,
for the facilities and formalities that they want to have. If it's an office client, they want to have a conference room, they want to have a bathroom, they want to
Yeah,
have
usually
office
pretty
spaces,
standard
workstations.
stuff, yeah.
Exactly. If you want to have a library, you want to have bookshelves and a kind of reading area and kind of maybe some quiet rooms and
chairs
kind
that
of
are comfortable.
exactly.
Decent,
So I mean,
decent
they're
lighting.
kind of usually a kind of like a series of standard known kind of things.
Mhm.
It's not the process of the architect to work based on the form as a discovery, as an investigation. However, I believe architects are incredibly good at this because they actually are kind of, are taught to understand and analyze form, as well as humans have benefited evolutionarily by being able to kind of make and recognize patterns.
Mhm.
So we will be able to look at these things and be able to identify their consequence. Hence the idea of that, that novel utility, that rather than the kind of, striated, kind of like somewhat inertial aspect of architecture, it would become something different. So your thoughts about this idea of kind of manifesting, as I said about your work, the manifestation of mechanical and construction drawings of unconscious nightmare aspects.
Yes, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
I think in order to manifest something with the articulation necessary for abstract thought and imagination to be quantified and solidified in a credible way, one needs very strong technical skills, actually, along with imagination, because we've seen people try or say that they are drawing something from their imagination, which is great, but oftentimes it ends up being something that is not very successful, even for the person. We've worked with a lot of people. We've had a lot of drawing students over the years when we have the time, some painting students, etc. We've both been architectural jury critics, Bruce for many more years than I was newer to that. But when you cannot quantify what's in your own mind's eye, it's frustrating for that individual. And the surgical delineation of a nightmare is nightmarish precisely because it's so well delineated.
Mm-hmm.
And if it were not so lucid, so believable, so detailed in its nightmarish interpretations, it would be something that's not very challenging. Do you want me to hold something?
No, got it.
That it would be not very intimidating, not very monstrous, because it would be very indistinct. It would be, and we've actually seen people come off with things that end up being more comical, not what they were intending, because they don't have the means from a technical standpoint. And I think that's a big failing now of people in the arts, is no technical ability whatsoever.
True.
Because that takes work. That takes years. It takes cultivation. It takes a lot of self-discipline, but the rewards are vast. Okay. Yeah.
Right. I think we have to continue this next week, because I think what we've discovered is the fact that, like, you've kind of brought up something very, very important, which is the fact that, like, in terms of the fact that this process is going to be investigated, the capabilities have to be necessary, which we have cultivated.
They must be.
Because the thing is, one of the things I think is the problem is the fact that in the 20th century, the people who were the masters, people like Dali, people like Picasso, and Ernst, right?
And
they all had brilliant technical capacities.
Yes.
But when they ran aground at the end of the 20th century, the people that took over from them in the mid-century, who didn't have technical skills,
it was a real problem.
And I think that's where it fell apart. So anyway, the next week we'll basically continue this, and we'll talk more about
this is a vast topic.
Yeah, we'll talk about the architecturally provocative artifact as a kind of necessary idiom. So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to the benefit of all for us to maintain this. Thank you.
Thank you.